Those are the cases where like the damage is already done. You have a rod in your back, you have screws in there, you have like actual stiff hardware that says you're not going to be able to move. Even then, people have very slowly, never working through pain, gotten to better levels than people who have a normal back. It's happened. So that just lets us know there's no case that's too far gone. And can things be reversed fully? Time will tell. No one's ever really tried. That's part of why we don't know, is because how long does it take for cartilage to regrow? It's like 3 years minimum of working it. But before 5-10 years ago, we didn't think cartilage could even regrow. So this is newer stuff coming out, because rehab is done in 16 weeks, maybe 32. No one ever has you do back extensions for 3 years.
How can DDD help improve the symptoms in order to attack the root cause?
It's a great question. Yeah, Landon. So you nailed it. That oftentimes these things just get coined with factors like age, and of course, there's some layer of correlation and consistency there, but it's not just because of a number on a birth certificate. If we look at, just let's cover the age topic again and just brush past it in 2 minutes or less. There's 90-year-olds who are running marathons, and there's 90-year-olds that are sprinting and doing splits and are super mobile. Truly. That fact alone lets you know that it is not simply just age. And people would say, well, age is that's outliers. It's about genetics. It's like, sure. But even then, that shows you it's not just about the number. It's about what typically happens as time passes. And it depends. How do you use the time? Are you watering seeds, or are you letting them dry out and dry out and dry out and dry out? And so view yourself like a plant and realize we're nurturing or we're starving. And starving of movement, starving of the nutrients that come through movement, starving of nutrition that feeds the tissue. But age alone is not a predestined sort of a cause of pain, at least in the skeletal system. And the outliers are proof of that. So you're in a group led by someone, me. I study the outliers and I work backwards from there, where science tells you to look at the outliers and disregard them because they don't fit the data. But where are we going to find innovation and try to improve things? Are all of our standards have to improve? We can't look at the average and go from that. We have to look at where does it go exceptionally well and what do they do and what qualities do they have? And then we try to support that best with our training and what is in our favor and what's in our control, whether or not we have the same genetics or not. And so practically what I'm trying to say is that you may have a family history of degenerative disc disease or thinning discs or rheumatoid arthritis or autoimmune sort of based tissue degradation. You may have certain age-related whatever consistencies of disc issues or weakness of bone, osteoporosis, etc. Every single one of those things can be influenced by adaptive stress to the tissue and movement, nutrition, exposure, graded exposure to positions that are normally vulnerable, and progressive just activity. So the fact that you go in and see a doctor about DDD and they tell you it's all downhill from here is a problem. It's misleading and it's not true. And the same with arthritis. And even autoimmune is trickier because you have to understand the root cause and what's happening. There could be so many things. It could be just gluten. You could have celiac disease that's leading to it. It could be a lupus or XYZ, so many different things of autoimmune, and especially with environmental triggers and maybe hormonal stuff and the world we live in now and microplastics, etc. There could be 1,001 causes of some disruptors in the body. But even then, regardless, the skeleton and muscles around it and soft tissue all have an advantage, which is they do better when you use them in healthy, productive amounts. And so I view it all the same. healing a herniated disc, that's just a symptom. Herniated disc is simply a symptom of your back. Getting out of pain does not mean you have a perfect back. It just means you increased your capacity higher than it was before to where you're now out of the pain. I think you guys can all remember a time, hopefully, in your lives when you were pain free before all the injuries came on with your back. Do you genuinely think you had a good back? Like you had a really strong back more than anyone you knew and you had confidence you'd never get hurt? Or was it just you had never been exposed to your back yet? You had a good enough back that you didn't feel symptoms. It's probably the second one. You probably didn't have the strongest and most mobile and resilient back. And I know I didn't. And so I say that just to say, even if you have 3 of your discs fused and 2 of your discs have changes in the bone, I'll show the pictures of it and share the screen later, but the modic changes to the end plates of your bone change and get calcified, and it's not as smooth of a groove, and then the discs are starting to thin, and even if you have a shift in your spine, a spondylosis, etc., any of these diagnosable structural issues you see on an MRI, you could have those things and still not have pain. I've seen it. We've had people with all of those things become pain-free, which lets you know those things alone do not guarantee symptoms. But then after that, if you keep going to higher levels and keep asking it and keep asking the body to be able to handle more, to be able to move more, to go deeper ranges, to do more load and force slowly, something's gonna have to give. And so something's going to have to adapt. Either, even if you had a fused disc in 3 of your segments, you could still get to my level of mobility of Jefferson curls, even with a spine that literally can't bend in 3 of the vertebrae. But what's going to happen is other vertebrae will become even more mobile to make sure it happens. Other things will open up extra to make sure you can do it. And I've seen stuff like that. Like the knees over toes guy, on one of his knees, if you guys don't know who that is, that's one of the guys that I was mentored by on this sort of a facing pain head on. He had 1,000 different knee injuries. He had issues all with his knees and for years had surgeries. He had an artificial kneecap put into his knee. So in his right knee, you can see his kneecap and then a big bulge on the outside where it was half of a dead man's kneecap, a cadaver, and it is like this big, his kneecap, where normally yours is this big. So I
That's
shared those.
sorry, excuse me, that's the patella bone, right?
Yep.
It's like a round, like a kind of like a hockey disc.
Yep, and it's floating, and you could see it right there. It moves, right? That's the patella. Sorry if that's gross, but it's this big. His is like this big. And the reason I bring that up is his surgeon told him, you're never going to be able to bend that knee fully because just mathematically, just straight physics, there's not enough space in the knee joint. You have hardware and this extra kneecap to where you'll only bend it this much. It'll never fully bend because there's not enough room. Well, he kept training split squats very slowly. He kept training the full bend very slowly. And over the 4 or 5 years of him doing that, he has the best knee bend of anyone I know. He can get all the way in there. So what happened? There's not enough room. How did that happen? His kneecap is still too big.
Muscle got built.
Huh?
I mean, cartilage and these tissue got built.
Other things had to move around and shape shift and get bigger and smaller and move for the ability to come. So his kneecap is still too big, but the groove underneath the kneecap got extra opened up. He became hypermobile elsewhere in the other places, so then he could still get the full knee bend, but it still pops out, but other things opened up extra to allow it. So it's the same thing with the spine. If you had a spine injury and you're supposed to never be able to bend it again, well, something else in your spine, if you don't worry about my L3, L4, or this specific injury or this specific diagnosis, and you just worry about slowly regaining from here to here to here to here until you can get to that, through you going for that, something's going to move. Tissue is going to adapt. And so, even if officially the facts are technically you will never move some part of your spine again, other things will open up extra, and that ability to flex is way better than avoiding it and becoming a robot. So I bring up that example because those are the cases where like the damage is already done. You have a rod in your back, you have screws in there, you have like actual stiff hardware that says you're not going to be able to move. Even then, people have very slowly, never working through pain, gotten to better levels than people who have a normal back. So even if you lose all your cartilage, you could have a pain-free back. It's happened. So that just lets us know there's no case that's too far gone. And can things be reversed fully? Time will tell. No one's ever really tried. That's part of why we don't know, is because how long does it take for cartilage to regrow? It's like 3 years minimum of working it. But before 5-10 years ago, we didn't think cartilage could even regrow. So this is newer stuff coming out, because rehab is done in 16 weeks, maybe 32. No one ever has you do back extensions for 3 years. So go ahead, Lanny.